Crownless was released in 1.1 as a new hologram boss, and oh boy, did they really buff him. For those of you that are having trouble, here's a video that can hopefully give you some tips on how to beat this boss. Unfortunately, in this version, they took out Crownless' mechanic where he was very weak to dodge counters. This means that there's not really a cheese strategy for this fight anymore, but I still do have some general tips that you can apply to make the fight easier. First off, let's go over some general tips you can apply to make the fight easier. The first tip is try to not have as many effects on screen. Crownless' first phase are all kicks and punches, and this makes his animation harder to see. Coupled with the fact that he is the second smallest boss model in the game, it can really affect your ability to gauge what he's doing. Take for example using Jinshi and Yinling on a team. Notice how the effects completely obscure Crownless? This is a major reason why in this first phase, it's really easy to get clipped by attacks that you didn't see. For this reason, Jinshi and Yinling I would say has a handicap when used for fighting against Crownless. If you have to use them, try not to spam as much effects on screen so that you can see his model and animations. The second tip is to use the special mechanics of the fight that you can see when you queue up for the boss fight. See here, this buff gives you 15% crit damage buff that can stack up to 4 times when you dodge counter. As long as you keep dodge countering him, you can keep a good 45% crit damage buff on yourself. The final tip is if you're already comfortable with his moveset, but the time limit is still a problem, try eating food. You can easily unlock a purple dish that gives you 22% crit rate and has great synergy with the crit damage buff in this fight. And a bonus tip for those of you determined to use Jinshi, once you go into her stance where she can float, grapple upwards. Her stance allows her to stay up floating in the air away from many of Crownless' attacks, while she herself can keep attacking. Use this so that you don't need to worry about dodging when setting up for her big nuke. Now onto Crownless' AI. For his first phase, let's start with how he responds to getting hit. Many times when you're hitting Crownless, he starts recoiling from your attacks. If you keep hitting him, he will always recover with a teleport slide to the left. Half of the time he won't do anything, but the other half he'll punch you. I suggest at first you always dodge when you see the teleport. It is possible to only dodge a punch by seeing the punch animation, but you don't have to be that sweaty. If you're hitting Crownless and he's not recoiling, then he's starting up one of his 4 moves. Of the 4, 2 of them have a long windup, so they're really easy to dodge. The first one he charges up and fires a beam. This beam can one-shot a character, so be careful to never get hit by it. To dodge, look for when his chest starts moving and you see a yellow circle. That's when you should press the dodge button. His other long wind-up attack is when he crouches down for an uppercut. This move also has a yellow circle, so dodge when you see it, and dodge again when he dives back down. Side note, if you're using characters that have dodge counters that can hit high up, you can actually interrupt Crownless before he dives down. This is the only attack that can be interrupted by a dodge counter. If you're really sweaty, melee units can also interrupt Crownless here if you delay your dodge counter just a bit. His final 2 close range moves are a 3 or a 4 hit combo that starts with a quick punch. Both of these are a little hard to see the start of animations, but the screen will dim slightly before he attacks. That's how you know you need to dodge. After that, it's a simple dodge into dodge counter that repeats. The timing is quite intuitive, just dodge whenever you see the dodge counter finishes. Do note that the 4 hit combo's third attack has 2 hitboxes that you should dodge twice before you dodge counter, and the last hit is actually quite delayed. The delay is long enough that you can actually hit him a couple times before needing to dodge. Just wait until you see his leg go straight after his spin, then press dodge. If you're long range against Crownless, you'll do one of 2 moves in his first phase. The first one is super simple. He does a run up and tries to shoulder tackle you. As long as you dodge after he goes into his shoulder tackle animation, you should be able to dodge him. His other long range move, however, is the trickiest move he has in this entire phase. He dashes forward, pauses, then dashes up again and kicks you. This pause is to make you dodge early, and then on the recovery of your dodge, dash in and hit you. The kick is also high damage, doing upwards to 3/4 of your health on higher difficulties. My best recommendation is to not mix close and long range combat. Either stay all close range or all long range. If you mix both, this kick will probably hit you because it triggers the same reflex you will build for the teleport punch move that he has. Finally, onto the second phase. Crownless transition phases by pulling his spear out of the ground, then continues with this long 7 hit combo. There's no trick here for timing, you just gotta learn it. But you don't have to dodge counter every single attack like I am. I'll link a video made by Sweetly explaining delayed counters, which should give you a little bit more wiggle room for mistakes while dodging this attack. Do note that the final slash of this combo creates an explosion on the ground. These ground explosions show up in multiple of his new moveset, and they're a great way of getting in more dodge counters. Once you get past the initial barrage of attacks, you quickly learn that the second phase's AI is actually quite simple. He hits much harder, but his animations become easier to see while also having a much more reduced moveset. The most common move Crownless does is starting his combo with the lunge attack from his overworld version. From there, he has a couple of variations. He'll sometimes do nothing, he'll sometimes fly around and throw feathers at you, or he can go into his overworld 2-hit combo with an explosion at the end. Unlike in the overworld fight, I suggest you do not parry these moves but instead dodge them so that you can dodge counter. This keeps the crit damage buff up and gives you more damage overall. Another move that he can do after the lunge is a new move where he kicks you. The initial kick creates an explosion in front of him that you have to dodge, but very quickly afterwards, a fall of explosion will happen. You can see here I can barely get my dodge counter off before I have to dodge again for the second explosion. Other than his lunge move, he really only has 4 other attacks that he does. The first is his signature dive, which can still be echo counter, and I highly recommend you do so. This is mostly due to the fact that there's a timer, and him flying around really reduces the time that you have to hit him. He also has a second dive attack, which you cannot echo counter however, but it's only 3 hits, so it's not too bad to dodge. The final 2 moves both start out with his new stab attack. One has a long epic looking windup, while the other one has a much faster startup. The faster one only has a stab, but the long wind-up one will go into the same 7-hit combo that Crownless does when he enters his second phase. Because of the difficulty of perfectly dodging this combo, I highly recommend you parry the stab move just so you don't have to deal with a 7-hit combo. This brings us to the topic of parrying. Hologram Crownless is the first boss in the game that breaks the pattern of a DPS window after a successful parry. If you parry any of the moves I have talked about so far, he will then do a recovery attack right after being parried. Because no other boss has this kind of parry recovery attack, be super aware of it whenever you do parry Crownless, else you might get caught out. Once you get used to this recovery attack, you notice it's actually the same recovery move Crownless does in his overworld version when he recovers from being staggered. The only difference is he adds a stab move at the end, which you can parry. This final stab move you can parry with impunity because he doesn't do his recovery attack again if you parry this final stab. If you're extra sweaty, instead of parrying, you can dodge counter this move to keep the crit damage buff up. Usually here I talk about moves that Crownless does if you're at far range for him, but unlike in other phases, Crownless doesn't really have any special moves he does if you're at long range. He will just do the same lunge attack as the close range one to get close to you. As such, there's no difference between fighting him at long range or at close range. And that is all the things I found regarding Crownless' hologram fight. Do note this is for the difficulty 4, 5, and 6 moveset. Crownless does not have any difference in AI or moveset between difficulty 4, 5, and 6. The only difference is how much health he has and how much damage he does. Hope this video helped you out, and if you have any requests for other bosses, then leave a comment below. I'll also link a VOD of the full fight with Crownless, just to show how the fight will go without all these edits and slowdowns.